Go.
Oh, yes. Okay. Good afternoon, you guys. So I try to finish up Charlotte's Web that I've been reading to you guys. So I couldn't remember where I left off last time I read this, so I just took a guess. So we're on chapter 17, Uncle. When they pulled into the fairgrounds, they could hear and see the Ferris wheel turning in the sky. They could smell the dust of the racetrack where the sparkling car had moistened it. And they could smell hamburgers frying and seeing balloons aloft. They could fluttering in their pants. An enormous voice over the loudspeaker said, "Attention, please. Will the owner of a Pontiac car license number H2439 your car away from the... Can I have some money?" said Fern. "Can I too?" said Avery. "I'm going to win a doll by spinning a wheel and it will stop at the right number," said Fern. "I'm going to steer a jet and make it bump into another one." "Can I have a balloon?" asked Fern. "Can I have a custard and a cheeseburger and some raspberry soda pop?" said Avery. "You children be quiet. Get the pig unloaded," said Avery. "Let the children go off by themselves," suggested Mr. Abel. "The fare only comes once." Mr. Abel gave Fern 2 and 2 dimes. He gave Avery 5 dimes and 4 nickels. "Now run along," he said. "Now remember, the money has to last all day. Don't spend it all the few minutes, and be back here at the truck at noontime so we could all have lunch together. And don't eat a lot of stuff that's going to make you sick to your stomachs. And if you go into those swings," said Mr. Arbol, you hang on. You hang on very tight, hear me? And don't get lost," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "And don't get dirty. Don't get overheated," said their mother. "Watch for pickpockets," cautioned their father. "And don't cross the racetrack when the horses are coming," cried Mrs. Zuckerman. Each other by the hand and danced off in the directions of the merry-go-round toward the wonderful adventure and the wonderful excitement into the wonderful midway where there would be no parents to guard them and guide them, and could be happy and free and as they please. Mrs. Arbol stood quietly and watched them go. Then she sighed. Then she blew her nose. "Do you really think it's all right?" she asked. "Well, they're going to grow up sometime," said Mr. Arbol, "and a fair is a good place to start, I guess." Well, was being unloaded and taken out of his crate and into his new pig pen. Crowds gathered to watch. They stared at the sign, "Zuckerman's famous pig." Wilbur, hi Ryan. Wilbur stared back and tried to look.
Say I love you, Marlissa.
"I love you too, Ryan." He was pleased with his new home. It was grassy, and it was shaded from the sun by a shed roof. Charlotte watched her chance, scrambled out of the crate and climbed into a post to the underside of the roof. Nobody noticed her. Templeton, now not wishing to come out in a broad daylight, stayed quietly under the straw at the bottom of the crate. Mr. Zuckerman poured some slim milk into Wilbur's trough, pitched his clean straw into a pan, and Mrs. Zuckerman and the Albers walked away toward the cow barn to look at purebred cows and to see the sights. Zuckerman particularly wanted to look at tractors. Mrs. Zuckerman wanted to see deep freeze. Lurvy wandered off by himself, hoping to meet friends and have some fun on Midway. As soon as the people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur. "It's a good thing you could see what I see," she said. "What do you see?" asked Wilbur. "Dig in the next pit, and he's enormous." I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are. Maybe he's older than I am and has had more time to grow, suggested Wilbur. Tears began to come to his eyes. I'll drop down and have a closer look, Charlotte said. Then she crawled along a beam till she was
Charlotte said,
over the next pin. She let herself down on a drag line under. She hung in the air just in front of the big pig's snout. May I have your name? She asked politely. The pig stared at her. No name, he said in a big, hefty voice. Just call me Uncle. Very well,
hi, also,
replied Charlotte.
hi, shirt. I'm not.
What is the date of your birth? Are you a spring pig? Sure, I'm a spring pig, replied Uncle. What did you think I was, a spring chicken? Ha ha, that's a good one, sister. Mildly funny, said Charlotte. I've heard heavier ones, though. Glad to have met you, and now be going. She assisted slowly and returned to Wilbur's pen. He claims he's a spring pig, reported Charlotte, and perhaps he is. One thing is certain, he has a moist and attractive personality. He is too familiar, too noisy, and he cracks weak jokes. Also, he's not anywhere near as clean as you are, nor as pleasant. I took a quiet dislike to him in our brief interview. He's going to be a hard pig to beat, though, Wilbur, on account of his size and weight. But with his helping you, it can be done. When are you going to spin a web? Asked Wilbur. This afternoon late. I am not, if I'm not too tired, said Charlotte. The least thing tires me these days. I don't seem to have the energy I once had. My age, I guess. Wilbur looked at his friend. She looked rather swollen, and seemed less. Oh, the page before. Okay, yeah, okay. Where was I? I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte said. Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better. Perhaps, she said wearily, but I felt like the end of a long day. Clinging down to the ceiling, she settled down from a nap, leaving Wilbur very much worried. People wandered past Wilbur's pen. Dozens and dozens of strangers stopped to stare at him and to admire his silky white coat, tail, his kind and radiant expression. Then they would move on to the next pen where the bigger pig lay. Wilbur heard several people make verbal remarks about Uncle's great size. He couldn't help underhearing these remarks, and he couldn't help worrying. And now, not feeling well, he thought, oh dear. All morning, Templeton slept quietly under the straw. The day grew fiercely hot, and at noon, the Zuckerman and the Albros returned to the pig pen. Then a few minutes later, Fern and Avery showed up. Fern had a monkey doll in her arms and eating Cracker Jacks. Avery had a balloon tied to his ear and was chewing a candied apple. The children were hot and dirty. Isn't it hot? Said Mrs. Zuckerman. It's terrible hot, said Mrs. Arbel, fanning herself with an advertisement of a deep freeze. One by one, they climbed into the truck and opened lunch boxes. The sun beat down on everything. Nobody seemed hungry. When are you going to decide about Wilbur? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman. Not until tomorrow, said Mr. Zuckerman. Irving appeared carrying an Indian blanket that he had won. That's just what we need, said Avery. A blanket? Of course it is, replied Lurvy. And he spread the blanket across the sideboards of the truck so that it was a little tent. The children sat in the shade under the blanket and felt better. After lunch, they stretched out and fell asleep. Chapter 18. No. Cool of the evening. In the cool of the evening, when the dark in the fairgrounds, Templeton crept from the crate and looked around. Wilbur lay asleep in the straw, Charlotte was building a web. Templeton's keen nose detected many fine smells in the air. The rat was hungry and thirsty. He decided to go exploring without saying anything to anybody. He started off. Bring me back a word, Charlotte called after him. I shall be writing tonight for the last time. The rat mumbled something to himself and disappeared into the shadows. He did not like being treated like a messenger boy. After the heat of the day, the evening came as a welcome relief to all. The Ferris wheel was lightened now. It was round and round in the sky and seemed twice as high as by day. There were lights on the midway, and you could hear the crackle of the gambling machines, and the music of the merry-go-round, and the voice of the man in the Beano booth. The children felt refreshed after their nap. Bert met with her friend Henry Fussy, and he invited her to ride with him in the Ferris wheel. He bought a ticket for her, so it didn't cost her anything. When Mrs. Arble happened to look up into the strong sky and saw her little daughter sitting with Henry Fuzzy and going higher and higher into the air and saw happy fern look, she just shook her head. My, she said, Henry Fuzzy, think of that. Templeton out of sight in the tall grass behind the cow barn, he found a folded newspaper. Inside it were leftovers from somebody's lunch. A double sandwich, a piece of Swiss cheese, part of a hard-boiled egg, and the core of a wormy apple. The rat crawled in and ate everything. Then he tore a word out of the paper, pulled it up, and started back to Wilbur's pen. Charlotte had her web almost finished when Templeton returned, carrying the newspaper clipping. She had left a piece in the middle of the web. At this hour, no people were around the pig pen, so the rat and the spider and the pig were by themselves. I hope you brought a good one. Charlotte said, it is the last word I shall ever write. Here, said Templeton, unrolling the paper. What does it say? Asked Charlotte. You'll have to read it for me. It says humble, replied the rat. Humble, said Charlotte. Humble has two meanings. It means not proud and humble. The ground. That's Wilbur all over. He's not proud and he's near the ground. Well, I hope you're satisfied, sneered the rat. I'm going to spend all my time fetching and caring. I came to the fair to enjoy myself, not to deliver papers. You've been very helpful, Charlotte said. Run along if you want and to see more of the fair. The rat, I'm going to make the night of it. The old trip was right. This fair is a rat's paradise. What eating and what drinking, and everywhere good hiding and good hunting. Bye-bye, my humble Wilbur. Fair Charlotte, you old schemer. This will be a night to remember in a rat's life. He vanished into the shadows. Charlotte went back to her work. It was quite dark now. In the distance, fireworks began going off. Rockets scattering fiery balls in the sky. By the time the Arbels, the Zuckermans, and the Loveries returned from the grandstand, Charlotte had finished her web. The word was woven neatly into the center. Nobody noticed it in the darkness. Everyone was tired and happy. Bernard the truck and lay down. They pulled the Indian blanket over them. Dorothy gave Wilbur a forkful of fresh straw. Mr. Arbel patted him. Time for us to go home, he said to the pig. See you tomorrow. The grown-ups climbed slowly into the truck, and Wilbur heard the engine start and then the truck moving away in slow speed. He would have felt lonely and homesick had Charlotte not been with him. He never felt lonely when she was near. In the distance, he could still hear the music of the merry-go-round. As he was dropping off to sleep, he spoke to Charlotte, singing that song again about the dawn and the dark. Not to, she said in a low voice. I'm too tired. Her voice didn't seem to come from her web.
I'm not
Where are you? Asked Wilbur. I can't see you. Are you on your web? I'm back here, she answered, up in this back corner. Why aren't you on your web? Asked Wilbur. You almost never leave your web. I've left it tonight, she said. Wilbur closed his eyes. Charlotte, he said after a while, do you really think Zuckerman will let me live and not kill me when the cold weather comes? Do you really think so? Of course, said Charlotte. You're a famous pig and you are a good pig. Tomorrow you will probably win a prize. The whole world will hear about you. Zuckerman will be and happy to own such a pig. You have nothing to fear, Wilbur, nothing to worry about. Maybe you'll live forever, who knows? And now go to sleep. For a while, there were no sounds. Then Wilbur's voice. What are you doing up there, Charlotte? Oh, making something, she said, making something as usual. Is it something for me? Said Wilbur. No, said Charlotte. For me, for a change. Please tell me what it is, begged Wilbur. I'll tell you in the morning, she said. When the first light comes into the sky and the sparrows stir and the cows rattle their chains, then the roosters crow and the stars fade. Then early cars whisper along the highway, you look up here and I'll show you something. I will show you my masterpiece. Before she finished the sentence, Wilbur was asleep. She could tell by the sound of his breathing that he was sleeping peacefully, deep in the straw. Miles away at the Arbel's house, the men sat around the kitchen table, eating a dish of canned peaches and taking over the events of the day. Upstairs, Avery was already in bed and asleep, and Mrs. Arbel was tucking Ford into bed. Did you have a good time at the fair? She asked as she kissed her daughter. Ford nodded. I had the best time I have ever had anywhere or any time in all of my whole life. Well, said Mrs. Arbel, isn't that nice? Chapter 19, the egg sack. Next morning, when the first light came into the sky and the sparrows stirred in the trees, when the cows rattled their chains and the roosters crowed, and the early automobiles were whispering along the road, Wilbur awoke and looked for Charlotte. He saw her up overhead in a corner near the back of his pen. She was very quiet. Her eight legs were spread wide. She seemed to have struck during the night. Next to her, attached to the seat, Wilbur saw a curious object. It was sort of a sack or cocoon. It was a peach color and looked as though it were made out of font candy. Are you awake, Charlotte? He said softly. Yes, came the answer. What's that nifty little thing did you make? Did you make it? I did indeed, replied Charlotte in a weak voice. Is it a plaything? Plaything? I should say not. It is my egg sack, my magnum opus. I don't know what a magnum opus is, said Bob. That's Latin, explained Charlotte. It means great work. This egg sack is my great work, the finest thing I have ever made. What's inside it? Said Wilbur. Eggs. 514 of them. He replied. 514, Wilbur said. You're kidding. No, I'm not. I counted them. I started counting, so I kept on just to keep my mind occupied. It's perfectly beautiful egg sack, said Wilbur, feeling as happy as though he was constructed it himself. Yes, it is pretty, replied Charlotte, patting the sack with her two front legs. Anyway, I can guarantee that it is strong. It's made out of the toughest material I have. It is waterproof. Things are inside and will be warm and dry. Charlotte and Wilbur dreamily, or Charlotte said Wilbur dreamily, are you really going to have 514 children? If it happens, yes, she said. Of course, they won't show up until next spring. Wilbur noticed that Charlotte's voice sounded sad. What makes you sound so downhearted? I should think that you'd be really happy about this. Oh, don't pay any attention to me, said Charlotte. I just don't have the much peep anymore. I guess I feel sad because I won't ever see my children. When you won't see your children? Of course you will. We'll all see them. It's going to be simply wonderful next spring in the barn cellar with 514 baby spiders running around all over the place. And the geese will have a new set of goslings, and the sheep will have their new lambs. Maybe, said Charlotte quietly. However, I have a feeling I'm not going to see the results of last night's event efforts. I don't feel good at all. I think I'm languishing, to tell you the truth. Wilbur didn't understand the words languish, and he hated to bother Charlotte by asking her to explain. But he was so worried he felt he had to ask. What does languishing mean? It means I'm going slowing up, feeling my age. I'm not young anymore, Wilbur. I don't want you to worry about me. This is your big day today. Look at my web. Doesn't it show up well with the dew on it? Charlotte's web never looks more beautiful than this morning. Each strand held dozens of bright drops of every morning dew. And light from the east struck it and made it all plain and clear. It was a perfect piece of designing and building. In another hour or two, a people would pass by admiring it and reading it and looking at marveling at the miracle. As Wilbur was studying the web, a pair of whiskers and a sharp face appeared. So Wilson dragged himself across the pit and sat down in a corner. I'm back, he said in a husky voice. What a night. The rat was swollen to twice his normal size. His was as big round as a jelly jar. What do you guys think? What a night, he repeated hoarsely. What feasting and coursing a real gorge. I must have eaten the remains of 30 lunches. Never have I seen such leaving, and everything well ripened and seasoned was passage of time and the heat of the day was rich. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Charlotte in disgust. It would serve you right if you had any attitude attractive digestion. Don't worry about my stomach, snarled. It can't handle anything. And wait, I've got some bad news. As I came past that pig next door, the one that calls himself Uncle, I noticed a big tag on the front of his pen. He has won first prize. I guess you're licked.
Turkey sandwich.
Wilbur, you might as well relax. Nobody's going to hang any medal on you. Furthermore, I wouldn't be surprised if Zuckerman changes his mind about you. Wait until he gets hacking for some fresh pork and smoked ham and crisp bacon. He'll take that knife to you, my boy. Be still, Templeton, said Charlotte. You're too stuffed and blooded to know what you're saying. Don't pay any attention to him, Wilbur. Wilbur tried to think about what the rat had just said. He decided to change the subject. Templeton, said Wilbur, if you weren't so dopey, I've noticed that Charlotte had made an egg sack. She is going to become a mother. For your information, there are 514 eggs in that peachy little sack. Is that true? Asked the rat, eyeing the sack suspiciously. Yes, it's true, said Charlotte. Congratulations, murmured Templeton. This has been a night. He closed his eyes, pulled some straw over himself, and dropped off into a deep sleep. Well, said Charlotte, we're glad to get rid of him for a while. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Arbel's truck rolled into the fairgrounds and came to a stop at Wilbur's pen. Everybody climbed out. Look, cried Fern, look at Charlotte's web. Look, It says, the grown-ups and the children joined hands and stood there studying the new sign. Humble, said Mr. Zuckerman. Now, isn't that just the word for Wilbur? Everyone rejoiced to find that the miracle of the web had been repeated.
Hi, Christina.
He gazed lovingly into their faces. He looked very humble and very grateful. Fern winked at Charlotte. Lovely soon
Nicole.
poured a bucket of warm slop into the trough, and while
Hi, Nicole.
his breakfast, Lurvy scratching his gentle
Hi, Nicole.
with a smooth stick. Wait a minute, said Avery. Look at this. He pointed to the blue tag on Uncle's pen.
Hi, and hi,
Got
Nicole.
first prize already. The Zuckermans and the Avery Arbors stared at the tag. Mrs. Zuckerman began to cry. Nobody said a word. They just stared at the tag. Then they stared at Uncle. Then they stared at the tag again. Lurvy took out an enormous handkerchief and blew his nose very loud. So loud, in fact, that the noise was heard by stable boys over at the horse barn. Can I have some money? Said Fern. I want to go out on the midway. You stay right here where you are, said her mother. Tears came to Fern's eyes. What's everybody crying about? Said Mr. Zuckerman. Let's get busy. Edith, bring me buttermilk. Mrs. Zuckerman covered her eyes with her handkerchief. She went to the truck and came back with a gallon jar of buttermilk. Bath time, Zuckerman cheerfully. He and Mrs. Zuckerman and Avery climbed into Wilbur's pen. Avery poured buttermilk on Wilbur's head and back as it trickled down his sides and his cheeks. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman rubbed it into his hair and skin. Passersby stopped to watch. Pretty soon, quite a crowd gathered. Wilbur grew beautifully white and smooth. The morning sun shone through his pink ears. He isn't as big as that pig next door, remarked one bystander, but he's cleaner. That's what I like, said another man. He's humble too, said a woman reading the sign on the web. Everyone who visited the pig pen had a good word to say about Wilbur. Everyone admired the web, and of course, nobody noticed Charlotte.
I'll do my class.
Huh? Oh, sorry. Sounding a voice was heard on the loudspeaker. Attention, please, it said. Will Mr. Homer Zuckerman bring his famous pig to the judge's booth
Hi,
and stand? A special word will be made there in 20 minutes. Everyone is invited to attend. Create your pig, please, Mr. Zuckerman, and report to the judge's booth promptly. For a moment after his announcement, the Arbors and the Zuckermans were unable to speak or move. Then Avery picked up a handful of straw and threw it up in the air and gave a loud yell. The straw fluttered down like a confetti into Fern's hair. Mr. Zuckerman begged Mrs. Zuckerman. Mr. Arbol kissed Mrs. Arbol. Avery kissed Wilbur. Lurvy shook hands with everyone. Fern hugged her mother and Avery hugged Fern. Mrs. Arbol hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Up overhead in the shadows of the ceiling, Charlotte crouched unseen, her front legs encircling her egg sac. Her heart was not beating as strongly as usual, and she felt worried and old. And she was sure at last that she had saved Wilbur's life, and she felt peaceful and content. We have no time to lose, shouted Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy, help with the crate. Can I have some money? Said Fern. You wait, said Mrs. Arbol. Can't you see if everybody is busy? Put the empty bag into the truck,
Thank you.
commanded Mr. Arbol. Avery grabbed the jar and rushed to the truck. Does my hair look all right? Said Mrs. Zuckerman. Looks fine, snapped Mr. Zuckerman. As he and Lurvy set the crate down in front of Wilbur, he couldn't even look at
Hi,
my,
Christina.
said Mrs. Zuckerman. You're all right, Edith, said Mrs. Arbol. I just keep calm. Templeton, asleep in the straw, heard the commotion and woke. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but when he saw the men shoving over into the crate, he made up his mind to go along. He watched his chance, and when no one was looking, he crept into the crate and buried himself in the straw at the bottom. All righty, boys, cried Mr. Zuckerman. Let's go. He and Mr. Arble and Lurvy and Avery grabbed up the crate and boosted it over the side of the pit up to the truck. Fern jumped abroad and sat on top of the crate and still had straw in their hair and looked very pretty and excited. Mr. Arble started the motor and everybody climbed in and off they drove to the judge's booth in front of the grandstand. As they passed the Ferris wheel, Fern gazed up at it and Wilson wished she were in the topmost cart with Henry Fussy at her side. I'm going to stop there, you guys. Okay, so and hopefully try to finish this one next time.
All right, guys. Thank you, Marlissa, for
Thank you, Shannon.
another reading session with Charlotte's Web.
Thank you.
Sorry, we haven't picked up on it for a while, guys. But we'll start back off on chapter 20 next time. Tomorrow morning, we'll be doing games with me. So if you guys want to do some computer games, if you guys want to do some, I don't know. I saw that, Amanda. I'm glad you're excited. We can do some hangman or something. We'll think of something fun to do tomorrow. So keep it in your brains and we'll come up with something. And then after that, Nathan is doing karaoke. So if you guys want to get some karaoke songs in, just request them with Nate and with me tomorrow morning, and then we'll get a list started, okay?
Okay.
All right. I see you, Amanda. Don't forget, you'll be on the list, okay?
Okay.
All right, bye. All right, everybody. Well, then we'll just see you guys tomorrow. I'm gonna